It is time to talk Detroit Lions football on the Lads Football Network, the OFN today. And of course, when we talk Detroit Lions football, we welcome in this man, Jeff Risdon. How's it going, Jeff?
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me back.
You are the last of my 11 team interviews for the Lads draft guide. I want to remind everybody the draft guide, of course, this one is out. And this is still a great time to get the draft guide, maybe even better because you know where all the players are. So this is still available at ourlads.com. We have the info where you can click the link, description area, and purchase one of these. And you can also purchase the draft review guide. And that is the primary reason for this conversation with Jeff today. So Detroit, one of the 11 teams that I am responsible for. And even though it has been a couple of months now, I guess, no, about 6 weeks, 5 weeks. It seems longer than that, but
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it's still relevant because we are running through OTAs now. And that is something that I want to touch up on too. I mean, if we were talking like right after the draft, obviously I wouldn't be able to ask these questions. So I'm going to try to take advantage of this late scheduled interview to try to ask some of those questions that I wouldn't normally be able to ask you at this time.
Sure.
Jeff, let's start with that, and then we'll go over the draft and the picks and maybe some of the top undrafted free agents to keep an eye on and a few other things. But yeah, any particular news out of OTAs that we should, Lions fans out there should keep to be aware of?
So far we've only had one day of public OTAs where the media was allowed. We get another one tomorrow, which is June 1st, I think it's tomorrow. Yeah. I can't keep track of the days. But we got to see quite a bit. The biggest things, we did see what looked like, I should say, because we haven't had any updates, what looked like minor injuries to running back David Montgomery and linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez. If I had to guess, I would say that Rodrigo's is probably a little bit more concerning. Montgomery's happened like literally 20 yards in front of me. I was looking right at it. Didn't look like anything that would like keep him from sideline from a game, but you got to bring these things up. But beyond that, it's football.
Nobody's in shoulder pads or helmets.
It's unpadded. I want to say full speed, but they're not quite full speed. Like, yeah. Not everybody's going. Yeah, it's tough to gauge much of anything other than just seeing guys out there and who's lining up on what team.
That's true.
Where do the rookies fit in? Are they starting right away? Are they on second team? Are they on third team? Who are they paired with? If they're a lineman or a cornerback or those sorts of things. That's pretty much all we can glean from OTAs, at least at this early juncture.
Was there anything like that was like, wow, that's a bit of a surprise? I'm kind of surprised he's lined up there, and kind of surprised he's with the ones or the twos.
Yeah, there were a couple of them. Keep in mind these are voluntary, and there are guys that are sitting out because of injuries. But Frank Ragnow, the All-Pro center, is battling with a toe injury. We don't expect him to practice much, if at all, throughout the season. He talked about the problem that he has with his toe is just something that he's going to have to deal with. But taking the first team reps in his place, at least some of them, was Ross Pierschbacher, former Alabama center who's bounced around a little bit. He was on the Lions practice squad last year. That's a little surprising. Graham Glasgow is a guy that was signed as a depth reserve coming back to Detroit after a couple of years in Denver. Now, if you ask Denver fans, they'll tell you he's absolutely not a center anymore. And based on the film study that I did, I tend to agree with that. But it's still interesting that Pierschbacher got some first-team reps there. Beyond that, Jack Campbell, one of the first-round picks, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him extensively, was not starting. He was with the second-team off-ball linebackers. He was in a pairing primarily with Malcolm Rodriguez, but after Rodrigo got injured, then Jalen Reeves, maybe another former line, also slid in. But the starting linebackers, and remember, the Lions only ever play two. They are a 4-2-5 defense. Almost 93% of the time they run a 4-2-5. The linebackers were Alex Anzalone, which was expected, and Derek Barnes, which was not. So it's interesting to see that maybe Barnes is either getting an opportunity to prove that he can do something in his third season, or has made a jump in the offseason enough that they see fit to start him going into his third season because he hasn't really been there yet.
Interesting. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Anything's possible. Could be seniority. But we don't know.
Could be, and again, it's still very
it's
early
way
to,
early
to make any judgments. Just the observation point at this time.
That's right. Okay, yeah, because tell you the truth, I mean, I understand. We know why they do it, safety reasons and all that, and I do wish at some point during the season there was a little bit more practice, or the off season it was a little bit more practice. But because now there's an extra game in the regular season, I'm a little bit more okay with it because, without the practice, it seems to take like a month or longer sometimes for some of these teams to get into sync and to watch really good, precise football the way you want to watch it. That's because they don't practice the way they used to. But because we don't see the injuries anymore, knock on wood,
yes,
it's kind of quiet. I don't think I've even heard one injury in the NFL at this point. Oh, no, somebody's out for the year because he did this or did that in OTAs, where you went, oh, I can't believe it. We haven't even gotten to training camp yet. We lost so-and-so. So that's good. That's the whole idea for this.
That is good. And to that point, the Lions did replace the turf in Ford Field. They also replaced the turf at the indoor training facility in Allen Park, where the Lions headquarters is. Wow. I haven't actually walked on that yet, but I've been told by the players that it's a nice little upgrade. So that is something, on the injury prevention front. They were using the old turf, the technology that was 15 to 20 years old. They have the brand new, state-of-the-art stuff in there. I'm curious. I'm actually going over to the Lions practice tomorrow. I'm going to make it a point to go in and I don't know. I don't know if I'll lay down and roll on it, but I certainly want to get a feel for what the new turf is like.
That's always a great opportunity. That's awesome. That's great. That's why you got to listen to Jeff and watch his show, because he can actually do that. Not every Detroit Lion analyst can. Okay, so before we break down the draft, I want to. I've got a comment from one of our viewers. I believe this came. I don't know I think this came from one of our draft recaps with Dave Syvertson. It's a Detroit fan man, and he's got a lot to say. The one thing that I noticed out of this, and I sent you
you did.
So you can kind of read it yourself. And one of the things he brought up, and I don't know, again, when I read this, I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about, but I'm not from Detroit. And I'm not following Detroit Lions news like you, obviously. So maybe this is something that fans are also thinking about. But he's basically his question. He says, do you think it's strategically purposeful or simply coincidence? I mean, I hope I know the answer for this. That GM Holmes, biggest recent risks both directly affect the favored team of the conference. So I think what he's trying to say is that he's getting, I don't know what kind of conspiracy theory you want to throw in there regarding this, but he's I guess wondering whether or not the general manager of Detroit is, correct me if I'm wrong, is playing favoritism with trades.
That's kind of how I interpreted it, and the fact that the moves could benefit the Philadelphia Eagles, who are a team that obviously the Detroit Lions are chasing, could benefit like that. That is something that does get talked about in Lions, and I will tell you, I think that sending DeAndre Swift to the Philadelphia Eagles, first off, I don't think they had any other options. I think that's probably the best that they could possibly do, and secondly, I don't think that they're thinking that that's going to help the Eagles. They were ready to be done, and I don't think that they trust his football character, and I think that they would see that as a way that they could possibly hurt. I don't want to say hurt the Eagles, that's not right, but I don't think that DeAndre Swift is going to do for the Eagles what a lot of Eagles fans think, and I can tell you the Detroit Lions as an organization very strongly believe that. Okay. That's probably the way I'll have to phrase that. The other one that he brought up is Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter, the Lions passed on him in the draft. They passed on the opportunity to get him in the draft. Again, that's another situation where the Lions probably see it more as a strategic advantage that he's not with them than it is that he's with them. He was just absolutely not a fit for this team. The longer we had to argue back and forth about it, the more little raindrops that dripped down our spout from Lions headquarters, it became abundantly clear that they were absolutely not Jalen Carter fans. That was made really clear, and they did not see him in the same way that a lot of fans did and a lot of draft analysts did. Look, I thought he was a phenomenal player. I understood where the Lions were coming from and that they didn't necessarily want him. I will just point out the people that are talking about the production. He got 4 sacks in 36 games. Like that's not the production that the Lions were looking for there. I'll say the Lions are incredibly happy with Aleem McNeil as their nose tackle, or not nose tackle. I should be struck down for that. He is a 3-tech now. He is no longer their nose tackle. He lost some weight. He looks fantastic, and they are very pleased with what he will do in the role that Jalen Carter would have filled in. And Aleem is also a guy that fits very well into this locker room, and it was made pretty clear that the Lions themselves did not believe that Jalen Carter fit with the Lions locker room.
So, and you think that was more?
I think it's coincidental. To the person who asked the question, to their point, I don't think that the Lions made any I don't think that they thought he was going to go to Philadelphia. I don't think they really cared where he went, to be honest with you. I think that's something that fans get too caught up in general. This is more of an overarching thing. It's certainly not related to Detroit. In fact, I would say that it's more related to Philadelphia than it is to Detroit in terms of the fan base. But good teams tend to not care what the other teams do.
Yes.
At all. And that's something that I hope that the Detroit Lions get to.
Yeah.
They're not a team that if we don't take this guy, this other team, they don't care. They're taking what they need to do to get their team better or what they think helps their team the most. They're not worried about what the Eagles or the Vikings or the Packers or the Bears are doing. And that's something that also has been made pretty clear by the Lions inside the building, and I like that very much.
Absolutely. Great points. And we want to continue to let all of our viewers know if they have any questions, either if you're directing them, especially at either Dave Syvertson, the lead scout at Our Lads, or our guest, especially for a Detroit Lions podcast like Jeff. And it show's over. That's okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. Over. Keep asking.
Yeah, keep asking. I'll forward them to Jeff, and then Jeff will at least be able to comment with you on the channel page. And then hopefully you're watching Jeff on the Detroit Lions podcast channel here on YouTube as well. So, all right, now let's talk about right off the bat that running back position. Okay, so I have to immediately ask, how surprised were you that this took place?
I wasn't surprised that they took Jahmyr Gibbs. I was surprised they took him at 12.
Yes.
I thought he would be in play at 18. And the fact that they took him at 12 was a surprise. I'm not upset about it at all. He was my number 14 overall player. The margin between where Bijan Robinson was in my ratings and where Jahmyr Gibbs was in my personal ratings was not nearly as vast as what a lot of people make it out to be. And I think that would tended to be truer than was look, Bijan Robinson's fantastic. I think he's going to do great in Atlanta. I love that fit. I really like what Jahmyr Gibbs. If you're doing the, he's replacing DeAndre Swift. Well, he's faster than Swift. He's healthier than Swift. He's quicker than Swift. He's got better vision. He's a better receiver. He's a better route runner, and he's a better blocker. There's not really anything that he does that isn't better than what they had. I don't know how fans can really be upset about that. Just my take.
Hey, that's the thing, is that, especially with the running back position, it's when you get these guys that are that talented and can be real difference makers at the NFL level, you really, it shouldn't, and nor do I think it does bother most fans. They always like the skill position players anyway.
Right.
But yeah, I think nowadays, I think we are heading a little bit more towards getting this running back and how important it is to have a good running game in your scheme going again. I just think it's still not anywhere near as effective, or at least as important for most teams. The passing game, we get that, but you got to run the football. You have to have, and now the Lions have Montgomery and Gibbs, and we might as well even mention, because I'm going to ask you about the undrafted free agents anyway. I mean, to get Abraham after the draft, we all know it's just all about staying healthy for this kid. And if he stays
Yeah.
healthy and the team didn't have to give up a draft pick, I mean, that's also just the running back room looks really, really special.
It does, and I would say just one day of watching David Montgomery before he tweaked his right calf, which happened last Thursday, like right in front of me. I would say that his ability to plant and explode out of the cut is very different than what we saw from Jamal Williams. Look, I love Jamal Williams. Wish him well in New Orleans. Loved his personality, and he was incredibly effective as a between the tackles back last year. But Montgomery offers a little bit more when the play isn't blocked as well. And I think that's something that the Lions were looking for. That's certainly something that frustrated them about DeAndre Swift. Even when they blocked plays well, he didn't necessarily run to where he was supposed to do. And that's something that both Gibbs and Montgomery do well. And I think it's something where you can see Mo Ibrahim, if he can come in and be healthy. Look, I have to say this. The first thing I noticed about him in OTAs last week is, man, he's slow. He does not run away from people, but he will run over you, and he will run niftily around you in a hole. That obviously you don't get pads on, so you can't run over anybody in OTAs. It's not really set up for him to win. But I will say his lack of open field speed was very noticeable in the drills. John Kaminsky ran him down fairly easily within about 10 yards on an open field situation. So I don't know how much we're going to see of Mo Ibrahim. Craig Reynolds is back. He's a good player. He's got trust with the coaching staff. Jamar Jefferson is still around. It's his third season. He's hoping to make something happen. He actually looked really good last week. And they have a new DFA from last year who got hurt, Greg Bell. Keep an eye on him going forward because he made us collectively in the media look at him and say, who's that guy? Oh, yeah, him. He looked really good. So we'll see if he's got some juice left. But it's a good running back room. It's deeper than it has been in some time, and they trust it. And with the offensive line that they've got, it could be very, very good.
And Jamar Jefferson.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting, deep room, as you said. By the way, what do you think is the one primary asset that Gibbs will bring to the Lions offense that the Lions want to use him for?
So he is going to get out and run more intricate routes than what DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift was very good at dump off routes, at a chip and release, a simple swing pass, things like that. Gibbs can actually run a 6-yard out if you need it. He can run a Texas route where he will get open not just because of the scheme around him, but because he can shake a linebacker in coverage, or he can blow up a safety, coming off of that. Those are the types of things I think you're going to see. I'm actually writing a piece now for Lions Wire where I had two players that I compared Jahmyr Gibbs to historically. One of them is Chris Johnson, but he's not as fast. But I think we saw what Chris Johnson offered. The guy that he really, really reminds me of is Eric Metcalf, going way back in the Browns machine to 1989 when he was a first-round pick. I think he was the number 13 overall pick in that draft. And he was a guy that didn't necessarily run the ball super effectively, but he caught 54 passes for over 500 yards as a rookie, and I think that's absolutely attainable for Jahmyr Gibbs this year.
We'll see Gibbs then and Montgomery on the field together quite a bit.
Yes. Dan Campbell even said that in his opening remarks to us in the media room last week, and we looked around, and there was collective smiles everywhere in the Detroit Lions media room with that one.
Sounds good. All right, so that's the running back room. I tell you what, let's stick on offense and let's talk about the second-round pick, Sam Laporta. No surprise. This was a big topic of discussion. Tight end. I know a lot of fans and look, I think the fans got what they wanted because it wasn't a first pick. It wasn't in the first round. It wasn't a first round. It was a second round. And now you can say what you want about whether Laporta is the right tight end or not, but the fact is does seem like he's a safe pick. He seems like he's not going to be one. We're not looking at Kittle. We're not looking at one of these like monster tight ends from Iowa, but we're looking at a guy that just brings a lot of good stuff to the table.
And I think the thing that stands out with him is his relative athleticism. This is a guy that Iowa used as a wildcat quarterback last year. and he's incredible after the catch. And I think that's something that, look, we liked C.J. Hawkinson. Again, wish him well in Minnesota. No bad blood whatsoever. I think he's going to do very well there. He wasn't good after the catch, and I think that that's something that Laporta offers. The blocking is going to be a little bit of a work in progress for him.
Yep.
So one of the debates that we had in Lions Land was, are they going to take an all-around type tight end, which was like a Michael Mayer, or were they going to take more of a specialist, whether it was like a Dalton Kincaid or Laporta or Luke Musgrave, someone like that who was much more of a receiving specialist, or Darnell Washington as sort of a blocking specialist. And it turns out they went to the receiving specialist in Laporta, but I do think that there is some potential for him to become an inline guy. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of him other than flexed out in the slot, maybe as a motion. You could even see him line up in the backfield and flex out from that, just based on the matchups, or do some lead blocking as a sort of H-back, fullback type if they choose to use that. That's sort of the versatility that he brings. But the run after the catch is the big attribute that they were looking for, and he certainly offers that.
And who right now is, if they have two tight ends, and I'm not sure how often they'll use that, but let's say they do, who's the blocking tight end? Who's the inline guy? Number one.
Probably, and I say this probably because we don't. Brock Wright is probably that. Wouldn't surprise me if James Mitchell, the fifth rounder from last year, emerges as that guy because he has the best physical profile to do that. And he came along slowly. This was one of the guys that they drafted who was injured. Was going to be third round, maybe early fourth round guy. They got him late in the fifth because he couldn't play. He didn't play until towards the end of the season. Showed flashes of what he can do, and I think that that's gonna be one of the camp battles to watch, honestly. And I can't ignore Shane Zylstra, who was probably the best tight end outside of Laporta in OTAs last week in terms of receiving talent. Like he's got a shot to stick around too. That's gonna be one of the fun battles. Is do they keep 3 or 4 tight ends, and who is that third or fourth tight end? That's one of the things that we're going to find out this summer.
Yeah, because we talked last year about Derek Deese as a UDFA. That was intriguing. Now it's his second year. So that's going to be an interesting battle at training camp. Like you said, who's the third, fourth, or, practice squad guy, or somebody who might have to leave. Okay, wide receiver. Now, before I talk about the draft pick, since we're talking wide receiver, this is as good as time as any to talk about Jameson Williams. When I hear players say things like Jameson said regarding, I didn't know this or I didn't know that, I'm not surprised by it anymore, because I know veteran athletes who, I don't know this, I don't know that. So sometimes you think to yourself, well, I thought they go to these. I thought especially once they're drafted, they sit in a room with the coach, and the specific coach will go over a lot of these little personal things and issues they got to stay away from. And isn't this one of the things, gambling? Isn't this something that should be like, here's a template, read it back and forth. It's going to go over everything you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, with this, with that, with gambling, with that. So I don't know, maybe every team does it, and it's up to the player to actually read or take in the information. But this kind of stuff just happens. And I don't think, you tell me, because you're the Lions guy, but it just seems like, okay, yeah, he just didn't know.
And the context here is that he wasn't the only Lion who got it. There were 3 other players who got suspended. None of them are still with the Lions, that also were guilty of it. 2 of them, CJ Moore and Quintez Cephas, the veterans on the team, are no longer with him because they actually bet on football. And so I'm going to say that maybe the Lions needed to do a better job of communicating the message, because they also fired a couple of staffers, and they're under investigation now as we speak on May 31st as we're recording this, for another player to potentially get suspended out of this as well. So I'm going to shift some of the blame off of JMO there to the Lions messaging.
Okay.
And then maybe they need to do a better job of it. Now, is it the player's responsibility? Hell yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And he's got to know, and he's got to do better. And I think, to his credit, he has stepped up and said, you know what, I messed up. I'm not going to appeal this. We don't even know if he can appeal it, but if he could, he's not going to. He's going to serve his time and hopefully move on and be better from it. And hopefully he learns, and hopefully the Lions themselves learn from it too. The issue that we have with JMO is that, look, he caught one pass as a rookie, as the number 12 overall pick. Like we knew he was going to be injured. We know it's going to be delayed gratification. But now he's going to have one catch through his first 24 NFL games. Like, that's
so he's suspended for what? How many games?
6.
6. Okay.
Yeah. So that's
we're getting to that point.
I think if he had performed well as a rookie, I think we wouldn't have our collective clutching pearls that we have. But because he did drop more passes than he caught, and he did do that we're a little worried about it. And I think that's a very fair reaction for the fans who are going to some histrionics about it. Like, I'm not going to blame them. I'm not there with it yet. And I'll say this. I watched him last Thursday in OTAs. He dropped 2 passes that if you're an NFL receiver, let alone a first-round NFL receiver, you need to catch. Yeah. If the ball hits you in 2 hands and no defender hits you with those 2 hands, you got to catch that ball. And he put 2 of them on the ground. There's a lot of anxiety around JMO is probably the best way to say it. And I get it, but I don't want it to be too much because, again, he's a young guy. He didn't necessarily have a great veteran influence around him last year. DJ Chark was fine, but not necessarily that guy. They brought in Marvin Jones, and I think Marvin is going to be the guy that sort of takes him under his wing. At least that's the hope. And also that the coaching staff knows Jameson a little bit better and that he's a little bit more removed from, being a college student and being a young guy, and now realizes that there are a lot more consequences to his actions than what there would be if you did this sort of thing in the SEC or the Big Ten when he was at Ohio State before that, that can get swept under the rug or bought away by donors and, connections. That doesn't happen in the NFL, and I think he's learning that the hard way.
That's the thing we have to remember about Jameson, too, is that
he's so young, man.
He's young. So young. He just took off out of basically nowhere for the 1 year at Alabama after he was basically shut out of being able to do anything at Ohio State. And then, boom, he's in the NFL. But I will say this, and I'm not, look, everybody wants to take the best that you can out of someone's talent like that. And everybody knows as a wide receiver, the hope is that with all of his ability as a playmaker, once he gets the ball in his hands, that he could be that special. The worst case scenario, I would say, is maybe at some point, if things are not looking good, if he's struggling a little bit, all right, it's time to start returning kicks.
Yeah, and he becomes Ted Ginn 2.0, and there are worse things to be than that.
Or maybe that'll get him going. Maybe
and that could very well be too. And remember, he was also an exceptional special teams
dynamic.
Donor. Yes, and that's look. Obviously, you don't want to use the number 12 pick on that. That's more of a Matthew Slater 5th round type pick for the Patriots. But at least you can salvage something out of it. And we're far away from that. I still expect Jameson Williams to be the starting wide receiver once he's reinstated. I think he will offer a dynamic. I will say, just from watching him last week, his attention to detail on routes is already better than it was a year ago when we first started seeing him run routes in practice. So there is some progress going on. We just really need to see it on the field, I think, to ameliorate some fears because there is a lot of anxiety around JMO.
All right. Well, let's talk about the round 7 edition, Antoine Green from North Carolina. So what is it? Anytime you get into these late picks, it is what it is. But when I look at the unit for Detroit, I do not see, like for tight ends and running backs, I see back of the unit depth. I don't really see that with the wide receiver unit. I see a really good 4. Williams makes 5. So that opens up that last spot to be kind of wide open. And maybe somebody emerged that I don't know of, but you're around these guys. So what's Antoine Green's chances of making the roster, and who does he have to compete with?
He is fighting with I would say Caleb Freeman, but I think Caleb is safe because he was quietly a lot better than advertised last year as sort of the number 4 receiver, and I think he's pretty safe. It's kind of where they want to go with it. Do they want to roll with Tom Kennedy as the dependable, do sort of everything slot guy? Or do they want a vertical field stretcher who can, come in and is going to get a chance to do this with Jameson out? He's a vertical guy. He showed that at North Carolina. He can go up and make a contested catch. He played with a future NFL quarterback in Drake May. Spoiler alert, he's really good. And we'll be talking about Drake May a lot coming, 6 to 9 months from now. So Dave Phipp is the Lions special teams coordinator, and he said something interesting when he was asked about the newcomers, and he said he was surprised that Antoine Green didn't return kicks at North Carolina, and I kind of am too, because I think his profile says that he could be pretty darn good at it, and I wonder if that's his avenue towards making the Lions as a rookie, because as a wide receiver, he might be the odd man out, but if he can build in, he's a return. And by the way, the return guy from last year, Justin Jackson, is no longer in Detroit. Doesn't look like he's coming back. So that's an opening. That's a spot for him to compete, and it wouldn't shock me if the Lions converted him into a full-time return man who can also come in as your, number 5 outside receiver. When you go to a spread, you need to run 4 verts. That type of thing. I don't think you're going to see a lot of production from him, but I think that's where his niche will be.
So in reality, you're probably looking at he'd have to beat out Tom Kennedy more than likely.
Yeah, or again, there's a couple of undrafted free agents who factor in. Drummond from Eastern Michigan, who's got signed after a tryout and looked good. Chad Cota is in town. Not Chad.
Chase.
Chase.
Who's
Cota.
Who has the better shot of those two undrafted free agents?
I would say Drummond, just because I think he's got the local angle, and I think his speed showed up even just running in and not even in pads last week. But that guy can really, really scoot. He made a catch on an in-breaking route where he accelerated after it, and it was something that not a lot of guys you see in Lions camp can do, and I think that gives him a shot. But we were excited. Last year they had 3 undrafted rookie wide receivers: Javon McKinley, Jonathan Adams, and the third one escapes me. But we thought all 3 of them had a chance to make it, and one of them didn't even make it in the USFL.
There you go.
You never know with the UDFAs.
Absolutely, it's a crapshoot. Okay, so also staying on offense, on the offensive line, Colby Sorsdal.
Yeah.
All right, so there were a couple of later round, well, I shouldn't say late round, but 2 of the last 3 picks, and this was one of them, where people were like, okay, interesting that they chose this particular player at all, let alone the 5th round. So, he's not a Division I player, but they had to have liked. There's got to be something specific that they like about him scheme-wise. What is it?
He's an ass kicker. That's the only way you can say it. If you watch his William and Mary film, which is not easy to get, by the way, I went in the draft when they called his name up. I was aware of who he was. I had never seen him play. So it was kind of a crash course for me and a lot of the other people who cover the Lions. And getting it. He was a tackle in college. I don't want to say they're converting him to guard because he did get a few reps at tackle, but it seems like he's going to be moving inside to guard. But just his playing demeanor and the way that he goes out and aggressively attacks the defense, it reminds you of what Penei Sewell does as the Lions right tackle. It reminds you of what Jonah Jackson does as the Lions left guard. Like, these are guys that are going to take, even in pass protection, they're going to fire out into you. They're not waiting. That's what Sorsdal does. Now, I don't know if he's going to be able to do it nearly as effectively because I don't think he's the athlete that either of those two are. But I understand the allure after watching some William and Mary film and just seeing him and listening to him talk for a little bit last week. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, the general manager and coach, talk a lot about, they use the phrase cut from the same cloth. It's clear that Colby Sorsdal is also from that cloth too, and that means something to the Lions. It absolutely does.
Well, in other words, he's a Dan Campbell kind of guy.
Yeah, kneecap biter. Yep.
All right. Now, let's stick on the offensive line because there's 3 undrafted free agents that are sitting there along the line. Actually, yes, 3. Connor Galvin, I've heard most of. Which one of those 3, Swoboda, Cecil, and Galvin, do you think, or 2, or all 3? But I know how tough it's going to be because this is, of course, this is a very good line, so it's not going to be easy for any of these guys to make the team. But who has the best shot?
I'm just going to say, based off my initial impressions, it's Ryan Swoboda because this is a team that rostered Dan Skipper for the better part of 4 seasons. Dan Skipper isn't back, and when Ryan Swoboda ran onto a formation, one of the other Lions writers and I looked at each other like, I thought Dan Skipper was gone. Like he's a carbon copy of him physically, and he might actually be a little bit more athletic. He's 6'9", and every bit. Look, I have a son that's 6'9". I saw Swoboda. I'm like, yep, he's legit. He's really 6'9". He's got a shot to be the Lions do use a 6th offensive lineman as a blocking tight end a lot. Now, a lot of us thought, and I'm certainly raising my hand here, that they did that because they didn't really have a blocking tight end. They ran it on 11% of their offensive plays last year. Maybe they will just like doing that, and what dynamic it brings in. That's Ryan Swoboda's angle. Matt Nelson is currently that guy. I can tell you that they're not thrilled with how he's developed as a tackle prospect. Remember, he was a defensive lineman at Iowa that they've converted, and it's not like that they don't like him or trust him, but I think that they think that maybe somebody could do better, and Swoboda could be that guy. I will say though, the Brad Cecil, the interior depth offensive line is wide open, and if he shows something, they have shown in the past that they're not afraid to keep somebody that if they see something.
Interesting. So you actually talked about the 2 guys that I didn't know.
Yeah, and then that's nothing against
Galvin.
Galvin, but that's I think
because Galvin had a 4th round grade. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, to me, he doesn't offer like Brad Cecil. You know what you're getting with it. He's a guy that can snap and fire out and go get to the second level and make a block. Swoboda, he offers you that. I'm not sure what Connor Galvin offers you that Ross Pierschbacher or Logan Stenberg or somebody like that doesn't offer. That's on Kawodi Awosika that's already on the roster offers you. You understand that? Does that make sense?
Sure. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like then. I mean, because they did. You mentioned Glasgow. We talked about him being added to the team. So maybe Matt Nelson better pick it up. From what you're saying, it's possible he's going to have a good camp to stick on this team now. And what about the other guys? Who else do you think? Now, Fetty was also signed. So is there no? And it's not like he has a great track record. So who is Glasgow the only veteran, or maybe Stenberg? But is Glasgow the only veteran that you think maybe has a legitimate roster spot?
Yeah, and he's going to have to be better than he was in Denver. I know the Lions paid him a fairly sizable money to come back. But if you watched Denver last year, like he wasn't.
Yeah.
That ankle injury that he had against Dallas. I mean, to me, I thought he was done like right there. I expected he would never play again. To his credit, he's tried to tough it out, but we got to see something. I wouldn't say that he's guaranteed, but it's probably pretty close. But yeah, they don't really have that. They do get Halapulu Vaitai back as their starting right guard, and I think that's going to help a lot of things as long as his back is okay. Look, we talked to him last week. He looks great. He seems like he's healthy. He seems like he's ready to roll. The Lions do have some history with getting guys to come back from back injuries, so hopefully he can play 17 and we don't have to worry about it. But
okay,
yeah, it's the NFL. You never know.
Yeah. So as good as the starters are, it's the backup unit that really.
Yeah, the depth is very worrisome. I mean, Ross Pierschbacher, I think he's played in a handful of games over his NFL career. Jermaine Fetty is just not somebody that I have any confidence in. Look, he was his first day on the job last Thursday when we saw him. So he was just sort of getting the lay of the land. So it's way too early to judge on
sure.
that. But if you watched him in Chicago, it's probably not very promising.
No. And Obinna Eze was kind of in that same spot Galvin was last year as a
Yeah,
draftable guy, same kind of round, fifth roundish kind of guy that wasn't drafted, that the Lions signed, and he's still on the team.
he's still around, and he's got a chance. If he can ever learn to move his feet, he's got a shot. But he didn't do that in 2022,
Right.
unfortunately.
Last but not least on offense, the big one for a round 3 pick, and that is Hendon Hooker. And to get Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round, you could have easily went late first. Nobody would have blinked an eye. And
that's right.
What a dream scenario for the Lions and the fans. How perfect. We talked about the whole, well, it doesn't make sense to use one of your early picks on a quarterback because you got Goff, and you still kind of want him around for another year or two, and it would be better if you just waited maybe in the 2nd round, and then maybe you get a Hendon Hooker in the 2nd round. Well, no, you didn't need to get in 2 picks in the 2nd round. You didn't need to take Hendon Hooker there. You got him in the 3rd round. That had to be awesome.
It's still shocking to me that happened. I'm very happy about it. I loved Hooker. I wouldn't have had a problem if they took him with the 18th pick. So the fact that they got him, I think it's 72. I was ecstatic. I love it. It's a perfect plan because the timelines sync so well. Jared Goff's the starter for 2023, and he should be. He was great at the end of last year. You got to keep that rolling. He's earned every chance to keep that rolling and to earn that new big contract. But if he's falls back to being the guy that he was, or he gets too much money dancing in his eyes, I don't think that's going to happen, by the way, but you never know with these things. They've got a guy who's not ready to play this year, at least not early this year, that can learn their offensive system, get some chemistry with wide receivers, understand what the offense is, understand what being a Detroit Lion under Dan Campbell is all about. And then you've got insurance going into 2024. And if Jared Goff is saying, hey, I want $55 million a year, the Lions can say, go to Las Vegas. They'll give it to you because we're not. And they have a starting quarterback already groomed in place. That's sort of a worst case scenario, actually, but that's fine with me.
Yeah,
I loved Hooker. Look, I understand that there were criticisms about his collegiate offense. I would just tell you that all of you who are now trumpeting Caleb Williams for next year, make sure that you're applying that there too, because it's the same kind of offense. And if you watch Tennessee and you talk to the Tennessee coaches, they will tell you that Hooker did do more than what was normally expected of that sort of air raid, Art Briles style. They used tight ends. They did use cross-field routes and reads. They still did it, where the receiver runs a fly pattern on one play. He's not running a route the next one. That's going to change, obviously, but that's more of a receiver thing. That's not a quarterback thing. And the downfield touch, the leadership, and the ability to make something happen outside the pocket are all things that Hooker does incredibly well, as good as anybody that was drafted this year or last year or the year before that. Those are the feathers in his cap, and I am excited to see what happens once he's eventually healthy in Detroit. Just on a quick health update, I talked to him at the Senior Bowl.
Okay.
I talked to him at the Combine, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him last week, but I will get a chance to talk to him tomorrow. He's going to do some media time. His progress is very strong. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes on the PUP to start the season, but then after the 6 weeks, that he's not just brought back and into practice, that he's going to be active. So that you're looking at Halloween as a timeline for when he can realistically start playing if they need him, and hopefully they don't need him. Hopefully, the hope is that Jared Goff plays all 17 games the way he played the last 10 of last year. If that happens, the Lions are winning. They're playing deep into January, and I can't wait for that.
Well,
because that Jared Goff, the one that we saw at the end of last season, is a guy that you can win a lot of postseason games with.
Yep.
The question is he going to be able to do that again? And skeptical me is saying I do need to see Goff do that again. That I wanted somebody else in the building to challenge that or to be insurance if he can't, and that's exactly what Hendon Hooker is.
And just the fact that, because I think the only thing really everybody needs to see from Goff is how is he going to respond now that the light's back on him. And because even in the Green Bay game that ended the season, nobody thought they were going to win. So it was like no pressure. So now the pressure is there. And lo and behold, when does it start? On opening day. That was like, hey, you guys, we were impressed.
At Kansas City.
Yeah.
No small challenge there.
Defending Super Bowl champs. Yeah. I just go out there. But hey, maybe that's the perfect spot. Because again, nobody's really going to pick them. So, but there will be a little bit of pressure. So maybe that's a perfect remedy to get his season started. But anyway, the fact is, honestly, I think more than likely, I don't think there's any way unless he either re-injures himself or somehow he's just not as good as we all thought he could be, meaning Hooker. There's no way Detroit's going to be in the mix for a quarterback next year. I don't see it.
Oh, no.
It's over.
Yeah.
That's it. They've got it.
It will either be Goff going forward on a big contract that he earned because he played fantastic again, or Hooker.
Who's the guy?
Being in a situation where it's sort of like when Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson were in Baltimore, and Flacco was good enough at one time to win a Super Bowl with them, but they realized that there was a finite team that he could win that with, and Lamar Jackson opened things up to being able to do more than that. And Flacco eventually got eased out. He won't tell you that it was easy, but that's sort of the same situation that could play out here. And again, that's the best case scenario for Lions fans, because that means that we're winning a playoff game, and that hasn't happened since 1991, and that needs to change.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot more about this, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge topic for you guys. But what really is going to, I think, be the biggest assistant under the microscope of the season is what's going to happen to Ben Johnson. Because all Detroit has to do is just continue to play like this, and he's gone. I mean, there's just no way that Detroit's going to be able to keep him unless he becomes the head coach. There's just no way.
Yeah. He had chances to leave last offseason. He chose to come back, and I think he realized that it was his best situation. I will say that I think he's going to be picky. He's not going to take the first job that comes to him. Well, he didn't. That was Carolina. He also didn't take Houston. He could have progressed further in that road if he wanted to. He's not gonna leave for just anything. But again, you never know what's going to be open. So I'm not planning on him being the long-term offensive coordinator. I agree with you there.
All right. Yeah. So on defense.
Yes.
The first defensive player added in round one, the second pick overall, Jack Campbell, and I'm sure he even has the same last name. I'm sure the fact that Jack Campbell, as soon as he was the man there, it's like, all right, you couldn't have found a more perfect linebacker that would represent Dan Campbell on the field than Jack Campbell. I mean, what a fit.
Absolutely. He is a hyper intelligent, hyper aggressive guy. That's a scary combination. His relative athletic score, if you go with that from Kent Platt, was 9.88. He's a ridiculously talented athlete. Now, he didn't always play to that level of athleticism, but he played pretty darn close to it. The Lions have had an issue for years in defending the middle of the field with both the linebackers and the safeties, and the offseason this year prominently addressed that, and Jack Campbell is the most prominent of those prominent additions to do that. Look, I don't know if he's going to start in Kansas City. He will be starting sooner than later, and he will be an impact player at a position where they have an impact player. I mean, Chris Spielman is my Lions hero. He's my football hero. Growing up in Northeast Ohio, I didn't have a choice at that. But, like, if he can be 95% of what Chris Spielman was, my God, this town is going to love Jack Campbell. You're going to see a ton of his jerseys around. And he's got potential to do that. His ability to simultaneously play in coverage and also run down a screen pass, or tackle Justin Fields on a designed quarterback run. That's something that, other than Alex Anzalone at select times last year, the Lions could and desperately need more. 175 more rushing yards to quarterbacks than any other team did last year. Jack Campbell is the direct answer to that.
You know, the more I look at this draft, and we talked about what a great season, of course, it was last year. Okay, but can you build up on that, especially now with the lights all on you? And what needed to happen was this: you needed to have a great draft, and that's pretty much what happened. And that helps you just carry over the momentum to the season, knowing that you're building on everything that's been building for the past few years, and it's still going. It's not like you could try to fool yourself into thinking it was a good draft, because you really can't nowadays. It's just and Campbell is a big part of that too, and it must be just a real exciting time to be a Lions fan right now.
I say that with some trepidation that something catastrophic will happen, but yeah, it is. It really is.
I know. I've been saying the same thing once Aaron Rodgers became a Jet. I've been saying the same thing. Something's going to happen.
It's a very exciting time to be in New York, that's for sure.
Something's going to happen. I don't know what it is. World War III in August. Something's going to happen. All right. Let's keep going here, because Brian Branch was the second pick in round 2. And interesting that 2 Alabama and 2 Iowa players with those first 4 picks. Oh. But Brian Branch, rated as the top safety for our lads. But is he going to be more of a slot corner, or how exactly are they going to use Brian Branch? And maybe he won't have one specific role.
That's a great question. We are all anxious to find that out as well. Remember, this is a team that brought in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who is a slot corner / free safety, split safety. Branch is sort of learning those same things. He ran with second team at both those spots behind Gardner-Johnson last week. And we're not sure exactly where he's going to fit either. Slot corner has been a massive problem for the Lions for a couple of years. Defending the middle of the field, passing schemes, tight ends, running backs coming out of the backfield is something that the Lions just haven't done well at all. Between Campbell and Gardner-Johnson and now Brian Branch fitting in, whether it's as a split safety or as a single high safety or a box safety / linebacker, because he's one of the things that really stood out for me from Alabama was how well he tackled. He can finish what he starts as a tackler, and that's not something that the Lions safeties have done very well lately. It's going to be fun to see where he winds up. Another guy I would have been perfectly happy if they took him at number 18. The fact that they got him in the second round, I was ecstatic with that.
Absolutely, pick. Yeah. That's the other thing is where. The Lions were, because again, you could say, well, Gibbs was drafted higher than you thought. Campbell was drafted a little higher than you thought, and you might have been like, oh, where is this leading to?
Right.
But all of a sudden, it's like, wait a second, Branch should have gone earlier, Hooker should have gone way earlier. So it all evens out. And the bottom line is, once it's all over, you just take a look at the players that you got, no matter where you got them, and that's the most important thing. Finally, Broderick Martin, round 3. So this is more like the Gibbs Campbell than the Branch Hooker. This is, okay, what is this guy doing? Not only being drafted, but being drafted in the 3rd round. So
that was a surprise. No doubt about it.
So what happened here?
He is a behemoth. He is 6'6", 337 pounds. He has an 84.5-inch wingspan. I shook his hand the other day, and I'm not sure that my hand has recovered yet. I mean, this is your nose tackle. He is your Dalvin Tomlinson type of player. And I don't know if he knows. I honestly haven't talked to Broderick enough to know if he's that kind of savvy, but if he could be that kind of a role, that's exactly what the Lions needed, because Isaiah Buggs is the starting nose tackle right now. He's better than Pittsburgh fans would ever recognize, but you can do better than Isaiah Buggs as your nose tackle, and he's going to rotate in with that, offset some of that. Absolutely, he's got to work on his pad level. He's got to get that down. He knows that, by the way. He talked to us. We did an interview with him on the Detroit Lions podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was very aware that he's got to learn to, and he's working on it by stretching out, by making his hips and knees more flexible. I thought that was a very savvy realization on his part. He's a big dude. Like that's the first thing that like it's cliche, but it's inevitable. Like he's just a big dude, and they need big dudes in the middle. Their backup nose tackle last year was Benito Jones. I don't think that he's an NFL player long term. Certainly not a guy that you want in your regular rotation. And I think that Broderick Martin is the direct answer to that. Is it a lot earlier than I expected him to go? Absolutely. Doesn't mean it's a bad pick.
Sure. So did they have to answer that question as far as why was he taken so high?
Yeah. So they thought that he was a very good fit. Both Brad and Dan and new defensive line coach John Scott, who came from Penn State, all watched the Western Kentucky film of him and thought, we need that guy. Like they all independently were like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay. And I've crash coursed on him. I definitely see the pad level issues, but I also see the length and the ability to absorb two blockers at a time and let the linebacker who's running behind you go make plays a lot. He didn't have Jack Campbell or Alex Anzalone or Derek Barnes behind him at WKU. That's true. Yes. So I think in that capacity, I don't expect a great deal from Broderick Martin, but I expect him to be effective at that. And that's what I'm going to – if he can play 30% of the defensive snaps and the run defense gets, from 4.7 yards per carry to 4.4 yards per carry, that's a win.
Do you think – not just because of where he's drafted, but you also talked about the players he's competing against, how reasonable that when the season's over and we look at nose tackle percentage of snaps that he's in the lead?
It could be, yeah. If he catches on fast enough, if he learns the defense well and plugs in right away, that could happen. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So on defense, talk about the undrafted free agents, because there were, I think I'm looking here at about 6 or 7. Yeah. Which players on defense have the best shot at making the final roster?
Starling Thomas, cornerback, University of Alabama, Birmingham. If last Thursday was any indication, he's already got a spot. He ran hip to hip with Jameson Williams on a fly route.
Okay.
That's impressive. He's long. He's every bit of 6'1". I think UAB listed him at 6'3". He's not that, but he's long and he can run. And from what I saw from him on Blazers film, he can tackle a little bit. He's a little flighty in his coverage instincts, but there's a lot to work with there, and it's pretty clear that they think that they've got something with him. So he's one to watch. Trying to think through the other one.
Well, the other kid was how about Brandon Joseph? Because I know.
Yes, he was taking third team reps last week. He is competing with the likes of Brady Breeze and Savion Smith, who's back after a horrific neck injury last year. Trying to be that number 5, number 6 safety special teams guy. Look, the Joseph that played at Northwestern, no question about it. That guy can play in the NFL. The Joseph that I watched personally at Notre Dame last year is not. We're trying to figure out which one we've got, quite frankly, and we'll know more about that going on. But he's going to get a shot to prove himself. And again, if the Northwestern Brandon Joseph shows up, it's going to be a fun conversation on who gets cut in that room, because the safety room is pretty deep right now. But that talent, not the 2022 version, but the 2021 version, yes. That guy has got a place in the NFL, and hopefully it's with Detroit.
Yeah, Brandon, Arliss had him as a 4th round grade. So that's...
Yeah, I think Notre Dame tried to turn him into Kyle Hamilton, and it's not what he is. It's not going to work. And I think they realized that a little bit late, but I'm very curious as to see what we get from him.
All right, and any of the other is that pretty much it? Morton, Durden, Smith are on the defensive line. Nowaski's at linebacker.
Nowaski is a guy to watch from Saginaw Valley State. He's a Detroit area kid. He tested off the charts. He can really run. He has some coverage instincts. He's a guy. Look, D2. I'm a GLIAC shill. I live in a direct triangulation between Davenport, Grand Valley, and Ferris State.
Oh.
All three of them were playoff teams last year. Ferris State won the national title. He was in their league. It's the SEC of D2. It's a great there's a lot of GLIAC guys in the NFL. Nowakowski has a chance to be the next one. I think he's a practice squad guy in 2023, but he's a guy that he's not going to go away quietly.
And before I let you go, Riley Patterson was just signed.
Yes.
Do you think he's gonna end up as the place kicker?
That's a great question. They got 3 kickers right now. They have Michael the Money Badgley back, who played pretty well last season. Patterson is back after Jacksonville decided to go with Brandon McManus, and they signed the best kicker in the XFL, John Parker Romo, who's the only guy of the 3 that can reliably make a kick longer than 50 yards.
Oh.
And now, both Dan Campbell and special teams coach Dave Fiff have indicated that if they're kicking 50-yard field goals a lot, they failed as coaches.
Yeah,
they want their primary emphasis is make everything from inside 45, because that's when we're going to use you. If it's 4th and 3 from the 38, we're going for it. We're not kicking those field goals. So the long leg,
I like it.
Look, I love it too. But in Detroit, we were spoiled because we had Eddie Murray, then we had Jason Hanson, we had Matt Prater. All these guys could make bombs.
Yeah.
It's tough to give that up because they were so dang good at it, and it was fun.
But those were a lot of losing teams.
Yeah, you didn't win a lot with those.
Winning's better than long field goal.
Winning is better. Yes,
Yeah.
I hope I get to learn that firsthand.
Yeah. And in closing, I was looking at the needs for going into the draft, and it's interesting, not necessarily when they were picked, but out of the 9 positions, Detroit had one player picked for 8 of them.
Yeah.
And that is really good drafting, because you're spreading it around and you're getting a player for each position. The only one, though, that was not taken was edge rusher.
Yeah.
And do you think that was just because of the way the draft fell, or do you think it's more of they're real confident with the players they have right now?
They are very bullish on Josh Paschal from last year, their 2nd-round pick. When he started at the end of the season, it's not a coincidence the run defense got a lot better once he started playing.
Okay.
They did bring John Kaminsky back. He sort of fills that role. They were never healthy at the same time last year. James Houston got 8 sacks in 6 games at the end of last season. I think he kind of slides under the national radar a little bit.
Yeah.
They like what they got in him, too. Charles Harris is back. Romeo Okwara is back. Julian Okwara is back.
Yep.
I don't expect Julian to make the team unless he steps up, but they're quietly deep there. They don't have anybody other than Hutchinson that's ever going to get a lot of national acclaim.
Yeah.
They got a lot of pretty good players there. So,
it's like you have enough of those guys that you can do this for one more season, and
exactly.
Next year you can maybe your top pick could be an edge rusher.
I think that makes perfect sense to me, Greg. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, I appreciate it as always. Great job. I love talking Lions football with you. Can't wait to do it again. Because that means that it'll be time to talk training camp and the preseason and the NFL. And
bring it on.
Big preseason and training camp is going to be for Lions fans everywhere. So, Jeff, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again real soon.
My pleasure. Thanks.